and welcome to Psyched, the podcast by the Women in Psychedelics Network. Today, I am so psyched to bring you Holly Nelson, this incredible woman who I met at the Psychedelic conference, and I think, like many people there, was just blown away by her magnetic energy. So I'm very excited for you all to meet Holly today and hear about the incredible projects that she's doing. Let me tell you a little bit about Holly's background. Holly is a behavioral scientist, an entrepreneur, women's empowerment advocate, and she's launched multiple businesses to really help people on their self-discovery journey. She's the founder of Lucidelix, which is a ketamine telehealth company, Truthmap, which is a mental health app designed to help users uncover their inner truths, and she's the co-owner and executive creative director of Total Warrior Combat, a TWC MMA. And she founded TruthMapVets, a nonprofit for veterans to cover the cost of mental health support. So we're going to hear from Holly how all these things connect together. And it's such an interesting background that you have, Holly. And I know, you grew up in a family of humanitarians and aid workers. And just from our, speaking off this podcast, I know you kind of came in with a mission. So I'd like to sort of start from the beginning, before you got into being an entrepreneur and all these business owners, like what drove you to go in this direction?
Well, thank you for that very kind introduction. I believe that really what happened was when I met my co-founder, Dr. Lukens at TruthMap, I had an experience of profundity that I had never experienced before. And this was before ever having, had a psychedelic ever too. So to have a sense of profundity punctuate your experience on a sober level is like, I think that's like a hit you in the face type of thing. And when that happened, I felt the need to really champion his understanding of who we are and like why we're here. And it is what technically drives me to bring that same sense of profundity to others. And that's basically it. It's that feeling that I want to share with others.
Wow. I love that, Holly. I love that word, profundity. I love that experience for everyone
Yes,
out there who's ever
exactly.
had that experience. I think so many of us, can thank psychedelic medicine for giving us those experiences. But like you said, it's not
It's
necessary.
possible. Yeah.
It's
At the
very
sober
possible
level.
in many different ways. And so this business partner of yours, Dr. Lukens, sounds like he's been pretty influential. Tell me about his work. What's his philosophy? He does something a little different with therapy. I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, so I like to, when I'm talking to people that don't know him because he's not famous yet, he's like my personal Ram Dass, and he really is just a mentor and like a spiritual guide for me in a lot of ways. And what he has is an understanding of human behavior that nobody else has really been able to grasp yet. And what he does is he slows down and he sees the nuances of who we are and why we're here. And he ultimately, at the center of his theory, is an understanding of human emotion that nobody else has really sat down and contemplated. And that really comes down to this commitment in the psychological and psychiatry industries, this commitment to rational supremacy and thought over everything. And when I started with him, it's funny, it was serendipitous. My roommate at the time, she was looking for a new job, and her mom found this Indeed posting for a social media intern, like the lowest level tier of marketing person you could ever think of, right on the totem pole. And she said to her mother, well, that's not my area of expertise, but like my roommate has a marketing consulting thing and maybe she could help this person. So she passed it along to me, and I contacted him and met with him and one of his colleagues for lunch. And when he came to me, he had like a Google Doc manuscript. And it took me a year and a half to read, and I helped him publish it. And what happened for me was this like shift in my my perception of who I was, why I was here, what the world was all about. And growing up the daughter of like missionary evangelical Christians, that's what Christianity is supposed to do for you, but it never did. And so to think that a theoretical work about human behavior could bring me to a closer sense of self-love, it blew my mind, and it inspired me so much that I felt the need to share it with others. So his therapeutic modality is built out of that theory, and that's what I am basically interested in championing.
Wow. What an interesting story, Holly.
Yeah.
So this book, it's called The Physics of Emotions, right? This is the
Emotioning as
okay,
a
got it.
verb, which is the
Oh.
difference. It's the nuance. It's that as a human, you're not a noun, you're a verb. You're moving through life. And emotioning in his book is the force that actually replaces the concept of free will. So the willful action, the volitional action of a human being is replaced by this concept of emotioning that he has theoretically, proven in his work. And it's just blows your mind when you learn the nuance of it.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more? Now
Oh,
everybody's going to be like, well, what is that? What's emotioning?
like what the hell is that? Okay, so emotioning defined by him is a formula. So E equals FMA, so a function of meaning and action.
Mm,
And emotions, so an emotion, it exists inside of our consciousness to act as like a trigger. So if you think about a smoke detector on the wall, there's the smoke detector, and then there's the sound that the smoke detector makes. So the smoke detector is the emotion, let's say fear, and then the sound is the feeling state that fear spikes inside of your physical body.
hmm
And those two things are separate. And then the action you take when the smoke detector goes off is a combination of emotion that exists on the wall, feeling state that spikes your body, and then the action you take is to flee because you think there's smoke, they think there's fire in the room. And so the emotioning idea is that there are 9 basic emotions according to him, and a bunch of psychologists have different basic emotions that they have theoretically tried to prove, and I agree with his. And the idea is that emotioning is what moves us. It is what brings us into that next second, that next millisecond of living. And as you take your last breath when you die, you're no longer emotioning anymore.
hmm
And the concept is that that I loved about his theory was that, okay, we think that we have control when we really don't, and our defense against our inability to control is what usually keeps us stuck. And if I want to tap into like the highest self of myself, I need to understand my emotioning. So what makes me tick? I need to understand why the smoke detector goes off or
hmm
why it doesn't go off. And so it's really just a granular understanding of emotions that, as far as I know, in the literature that I have, at least popular literature, I have not read anything that has really laid it out like that before. So emotioning essentially is what moves you through space
Yeah.
and time.
Wow. Okay. So interesting. Because I think so many of us often are experiencing emotions that maybe we would prefer not to experience, like
Mm-hmm.
fear or anger. So I'm
Yeah.
guessing that there's an element around, recognizing what moves us, but then also recognizing how to shift that
Mm-hmm.
emotioning energy. And I'm guessing
Yes.
that's something to do
That's what
with what
truth
you've
mapping
built
does.
into TruthMap.
Yes.
So maybe you could, tell us a little bit about this truth map that you developed, inspired by these teachings.
Yeah. Okay. So truth mapping is basically the method that is developed from the theory. And it's like a journaling method, but it's also like an in-person to person verbal thing because I can ask you the same questions that like a journal can ask you, right? And guides you through self-understanding, just like a self-understanding exercise that just doesn't exist anywhere else. So, for instance, we ask you the questions that nobody else does. We ask you the questions you are hiding from yourself.
Mm,
And notice how we're not saying you're hiding answers from yourself. We're saying that, like, no, the first level is you're not even asking yourselves those questions, you're burying them.
hmm
So, for instance, one of the first questions we ask you on your truth mapping journey is what is the biggest lesson you have never learned?
Uh-huh.
Now sit there and tell me what you know you don't know. And though you might not think you have an answer for it, a lot of people have things that pop up into their head. And the fact is, if a client is willing to look back at me and say something, that is a level of honesty that is completely different from the person who looks at me and says, well, I don't know yet. Now that's one thing. Okay, of course you don't know what you don't know, but the people that are able to sit there critically and reply to that with some semblance of understanding are ahead. And now I can get to work on that with them. The other thing that the method helps me with is even just on a business level or strategic partners or people that work for me. I asked them out of the gate, how are you going to sabotage this? If you were to sabotage this, how would you do it? Lay it out for me. And they lay it out for me in words.
Really? Do people usually give you an answer?
Oh, everybody. I've never had anyone say, I won't sabotage this. And maybe that's because I'm really good at hiring like team members or like partnering with good people. So if someone came to me and says, I won't sabotage it, then I'm going to be like, no, you're not working with me, because that means there's some semblance of you that's not there, totally there yet. But yeah, they'll lay it out for me, and then I have to take and gauge, and I would love to talk about this in our next segment of this conversation. I have to take a gauge of their self-esteem, find out what I think their self-esteem level is at. And from that level, I can say, okay, they've laid out this plan of what they would do wrong to make this go wrong. Does that match up with their self-esteem, and are they actually going to do it? And I'm able to predict a person's ability to fuck it up or not, based on whether or not they think that they're worth it coming to fruition or not. So not only does the method help people understand themselves, it helps me predict behavior too.
So you're talking about basically how you use this methodology, but let's just rewind a little bit. Truthmap is an app that people can download from the App Store. I know that you're, getting it into some larger organizations for, say, their employees or the people that they serve. So the things that you're saying that how you use it, or the insights that you would gain if you were working with someone on a one-on-one basis, is something also that people can get through the app?
Yes. So basically it's a psychoeducational app. So the more you journal, the more you know about yourself and the more you know about others. The more content you consume, the more you understand human behavior. What I'm trying to do is make everyone a behavioral scientist, both for self and for others, because if we understand ourselves and we understand others, we will treat each other better. We will treat each other with better understanding, right? Like
more empathy.
Exactly. Yeah. I saw a tweet that went viral last year. It was like, I'm a therapist, and the problem is nobody can hurt me because I know why you did what you did. And yeah, your daddy gave you trauma and this, that, and the other. And so like, I forgive everyone, and it sucks because people will then, reuse me or re-hurt me or whatever. And how can I fault them? So it's interesting because like the people that are like psychology students or therapists and stuff, like we know where it's coming from. So we're highly empathetic.
Right.
But the best part about truth mapping is it also helps you build boundaries without feeling guilty about it too.
Okay. Wow, fascinating. So you're up to some really cool things, including Truthmap, which I'm really excited to learn more about and test myself. But one thing sticks out in, your portfolio of things that you're involved in that I'm like, one of these things is not like the other. I must say you are my first female friend that owns a fight club, and doing all of these things with like psychedelics and healing and understanding your mind and empathy,
and then it's like
people who are fighting. Yeah, so how does that fit into the equation, Holly?
Okay, so for those like people that are listening who understand like Christianity and like all of that, I usually say that like even Jesus found himself, spending time not with the Pharisees or like the religious leaders of the time, but the prostitutes, the tax collectors. He went down to where the people were at, the people who were poor and sick. And the reason he did that was because the Pharisees, their defense mechanisms were way too high. They were haughty, they were egotistical, and he knew that his message was needed by the people that were hurting. And so I've always been a women's empowerment advocate forever, and trying to lift women up. And as I'm watching things happen in the world and in the culture, and I'm building my app, I'm doing app research, and I'm finding out that there's 20,000 mental health apps on the App Store as things are going. Started off 10,000 during COVID, and I mean literally 50% jump, but almost 80 to 90% of them are oriented towards females.
Yeah.
The rest are usually gender neutral, and there's a tiny percentage that are masculine focused.
Mm.
And it got me thinking. I was like, why? Well, I understand that, like, yeah, you drag your man to therapy because women are more likely to go. So I get it. But that meant that the capitalist inside of all of those app developers was taking control versus like the mission of let's help heal society. So
Mm-hmm.
I know that women are more likely to go to therapy. Instead of developing a mental health app that is gender neutral or male focused, I'm going to introduce a pink butterfly mental health app to the world and make money off of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I made the mistake of buying into that. And my first beta test was like a female focused one. And I'm still learning, I'm researching and stuff. And then I started thinking about the self-esteem of young boys who are coming up in this culture where we're talking about toxic masculinity and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And it really got me thinking. And then I happened to meet my ex-partner or my ex-boyfriend, and he was a veteran, and he had had all these experiences growing up that like a lot of women had. Like he was molested as a child, and a lot of more women have had that experience than men. So to meet a man who's had that was very, whoa, like what was your experience like?
Yeah.
And I start talking to him about the people that he's mentoring and all these men that are coming to him who are saying, I also had that experience. I also had that experience. And I felt this calling to make some semblance of destigmatization for that demographic. We ended up just right place, right time, right amount of money in the bank account for this opportunity to acquire this little regional promotion. And it felt right because, wow, this is a great way for me just to disseminate like my new Truthmap app and take care of the male population. Like the white male demographic is now getting an understanding of therapy, right? The white collar male is like, oh yeah, therapy, that helps. But the blue collar male is not necessarily given the time of day. They're not given the content, and they don't necessarily have the money for that kind of stuff. So to buy this fight league and to put this in the hands of men who are, like truck drivers and blue collar workers and change the culture from there, it almost felt like I needed to meet the men where they were at if we were going to make any semblance of change in this world. It's not necessarily the
Yeah.
CEO, the white male CEOs at the top that are screwing everything over. There's less of them than there are men at the bottom who are hurting and hurting others, and hurt
Mm-hmm.
people. So if we're going to take care of something, we got to take care of it from the core out, not necessarily from
Mm-hmm.
the top down. And that's
Yeah.
why.
Wow. And so are
Yeah.
you utilizing your truth map with your fight club or
Yeah.
through that network
Yes.
somehow?
So I'm the first MMA like promotion of all time to give its fighters free mental health care. So we give them the premium app for free, and we give all of my fighters get free life coaching with any of my coaches. We're developing other things like financial understanding and wellness, which I know plays a huge role in like mental health, right? And the idea is that like I wanted to take care of my athletes, and not only do I want to take care of my athletes, I want to take care of my audience. So when a person comes into my show, it's an interactive component where there are AI character voices in your head that move a storyline along its axis throughout the whole fight. And they give you clues, and you have to find out which person is trying to sabotage the show. In order to enter those clues and figure out if you've figured it out or not, you have to download the Truthmap app. So now every person that walks into my 12,000 seat arena has to download Truthmap app in order to figure out who done it. But at the arc of my storyline in the show is that whatever fighter was the person trying to sabotage the event, there's a redemption arc, because I do believe that our society has no clue what redemption is outside of like this understanding we have of Easter Sunday and Jesus Christ. And so I wanted to create inside of my storyline and the ability for people to really dig deep and say, whoa, okay, yeah, I was shitty, but that doesn't mean I have to stay stuck in shitty. I can change. There is an option for me. And if we also all look at each other and say, I believe you can change because I trust I can, we're going to turn out better as a species. And so, yeah, that's how the Truthmap app integrates, is that like I take care of my athletes, and then I take care of my audience, and make it so that now, okay, now the app's on their phone and they might be inundated with the content going forward. And I hope it really makes an impact.
Wow. Very, very creative, Holly. I love
I
it.
don't know where it came from. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, it's pretty freaking cool. So, with this is, Psyched podcast about psychedelics. I'd love to know, how did psychedelics come into your world? And
Mm.
you have another company, Lucidelix, working with ketamine. So, how does that fit into the whole picture of what you're doing?
So TruthMap as a foundation of behavioral understanding is predicated on Dr. Lucan's comprehension of defense mechanisms. It's kind of common knowledge amongst our group now, the people that are interested in psychedelics, but still not necessarily understood at the mainstream level, that defense mechanisms are the issue, not the issue itself. So like the escape, like the alcoholism is not the issue. It's what you're using the alcoholism for, right? Or like why you're escaping. And then it's not the fact that like you don't want to give up this person that is terribly toxic for you. It really is that you're too defended against the grief you'll experience if you have to give them up.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dr. Lucan's theory is an understanding of volitional motivation. So what makes us do what we do. And at the core of that is that we are a hedonic species. So we are more pain avoidant than positive goal oriented. And so our defense mechanisms matter. They are what form the crux of our dysfunction as a species. So we've kind of come up with this way without psychedelics to get underneath, little surreptitiously get underneath a person's defense mechanisms, i.e. I ask you the question just offhand, the one that I said earlier, which is like, how are you going to sabotage this, right? Like give me
Right,
your verbiage. You're not probably going to do it, but if you would, what would you do? So
right.
like, yeah, we get under your defense mechanisms there and we get to see what's underneath. But with psychedelics, it is like, it's the difference between if your defense mechanisms are a cement block in the soil and I lift it up to find all the little worms and all the gunk that's underneath, right? And it takes a certain amount of force to lift up that cement block. Psychedelics is like as if I could levitate the cement block without having to physically take it up with my own hands. It is just a different type of energy source that brings the defense mechanism up and out so that we can get to the crux of the matter. And
Mm-hmm.
so, a couple of years into developing TruthMap, Dr. Lucan's colleagues started to talk to him about ketamine and its use in mental health as it was starting to burgeon in the industry. And so we decided that we wanted to develop this product service company that could provide that to individuals who are just finding themselves severely stuck. Because no matter what, this is not 100% foolproof. Like it's not. And we had a client who had done a couple different sessions with Dr. Lukens, who's a veteran, and was doing some really good work, going deep, great. He'd done a lot more strides in the weeks he had been working with Dr. L than he had with therapy for like 10 years with CBT and stuff. But then Dr. L and I and another couple of our partners rolled out ketamine and we did the ketamine thing with him. And Dr. L called me the next day and was like, this man has not cried in 35 years. He's a military veteran, has not cried in 35 years. He's been going to children of alcohol, what's it called?
Like
The children of
Al-Anon?
alcoholics. Yeah,
Yeah.
Al-Anon, exactly, that kind of thing. For years, like a part of men's groups, no matter what, 35 years has not cried.
Right.
Sat there on Zoom with Dr. Lukens and for the first time in 35 years, released globular tears about his trauma and his grief and went really deep. And that person now is like championing our cause within his community just after that one session. And so
Wow.
what it really shows is that no matter how amazing Dr. Lukens is, right? Like everybody is at a different level of defense mechanism. And so that
Mm.
upper echelon of defenseness that's crusty and cemented and you need like a jackhammer to get to it is easier to get to when you've got something that really unnerves the self to the point where you can truly be. And that's why we decided to bring psychedelics into our little engine, my little social enterprise that I got going on here, because there
Yeah.
are people that just, that back and forth emotional and dialectical therapy doesn't work for. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, why do we leave them in the dust?
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah. And thank goodness we have ketamine as the one legal psychedelic right now that really, like you
Right?
said, can help those people that just aren't able to maybe lift that big cinder block by themselves.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
And
I
I
love that
wish, I
imagery.
wish there was more. You do? Great. So
Mm.
I wish there was more that was legal, but it's like we have to stick to what we
Yeah,
can so that we can continue to provide this service. And it sucks, but like it's, it's a start. So
yeah, yeah, it is. And I can see how, the dots connect together that like if people are doing your treatment, maybe they're working with a coach or they're doing the ketamine treatment, then I'm guessing they could use the TruthMap app like as part of their integration.
exactly. The hope is that I can scale the bot, the machine learning bot, to be an integrator, like a continuous integrator. So right now
Mm.
it's just daily journals, but our beta bot that took me like 2 years to make, and it's going to take some financing to really truly launch, but it's like a perpetual conversation you can have with yourself, but with another little being that's there to keep you safe and make you not feel so lost inside your head. So the idea is that like there's a perpetual integration. I can always constantly, whenever I'm feeling any sort of way, come back and just integrate the things that I might not have been ready to integrate 2 days ago. Or like you
Hmm.
don't have to wait for your next scheduled session and then you forget it. And then you get on, the Zoom call with your person and, oh, there was something I was thinking I wanted to talk to you about, but now I can't remember it. It's like you can literally just go forward with your life and just keep going and keep integrating the experiences that happen and your sessions with the ketamine and stuff like that. It's the hope that it's like a companion for people is really what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Truth Map Access.
And how do you feel about that being based on artificial intelligence? It's a rather like controversial topic right now. This, AI, it's developing so fast. It doesn't
Mhm.
have consciousness, but it is really developing. Like you said, your
Very
app is,
fast.
having conversations with this AI. Um, but I think some people would say like, oh, that's not, human interaction or that's not consciousness. So
It's not supposed to replace
yeah.
human interaction, but okay. Here's something that I like to say when people talk to me about this, because I've had a couple of people like speak to this and be like, well, what about? Okay, we are, so without language, does consciousness exist?
What is consciousness? Consciousness is information. What is information?
Language based, or at
Yeah, it's
least pattern
language,
based, right?
codes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
I'm
and
with
so
you there.
self-awareness doesn't really truly exist without our ability to talk to ourselves about what we are and what we're doing.
Right. Nothing exists
So
until it's observed. So
exactly,
self-observation.
right? Okay, so now the issue is that um as a human, so you're talking to yourself inside your head. It's actually called subvocalization, and a lot of people think, oh, that person's talking to themselves, like, oh, you hear voices in your head. Like there's nobody really truly understands that you can speak out loud inside your head, and it's not a crazy thing. It's like what we're meant to do. We just don't have to vocalize it, right?
Okay.
So I speak to the idea of subvocalization, and then I usually talk about feral child syndrome. So there's
Mm.
maybe 15 documented cases of feral child syndrome starting back in the 1700s. And the idea is that Jungle Book, Mowgli, like this little kid has been found in the Amazon or the forest or whatever, was raised by literal wolves,
Right.
and they're brought back into society and they don't speak a language. And so now they're studied, right? And they're taught a language and they now can communicate with you. Well, before they were taught the language, they might have had like the basic emotions of fear, anger, sadness, and disgust,
Mm-hmm.
the positive ones of interest, desire, and potentially joy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've seen dogs look joyful, and that's just an animal that doesn't have language or human language. But do they have shame and guilt? Like, were they embarrassed that when you found them, they were naked in the woods? It's like
Right.
the Adam and Eve story, right? And do they feel guilty that when you capture them and bring them to the lab to study them as a feral child syndrome case, that they were scratching at you and being like, listen, this is not good. Like, I'm sorry that I hurt you, but like, I'm really scared. No, they don't feel shame and guilt until they're taught those things through language.
Mm-hmm.
So when people are like, well, should a person really be talking to a bot all day? It's like, listen, you're already talking to yourself in your head all day, but to visualize the language you're putting onto the screen is a secondary layer of self-examination that just doesn't exist anywhere. It just doesn't. Because I mean, think about it. It's like the difference between like, are you the person that has ADHD that can do the Google Cal thing and really work it? Or do you need physical paper where you need to write it out in a calendar and see it on paper? There are two different types of people.
Right.
So it really does come down to the people that are running the technology, and like you have to trust them to be integritous. But that's literally what I believe I'm bringing TruthMap to the market for, is to just develop and improve human integrity, because technology has advanced light year speeds ahead of human integrity, conscious, and right from wrong. And if we just keep going down that path, we're just going to nuke each other. Like,
Yeah,
that's the truth. Basically, TruthMap is to keep us from nuking each other.
okay, all right.
I'm just kidding.
Put that in your mission statement.
Right? Vladimir
Well,
Putin,
I mean,
please
the
TruthMap
thing
yourself.
is, this technology is here to stay whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
So I personally would rather have people like you architecting it, than somebody who isn't trying to do it for good. So,
and that brings us back
yeah.
to the idea of capitalism.
Yes. Well, we need conscious capitalism because
Yes, that's what I call it too.
yeah, I mean, money is energy that moves things forward. So I want to just, thank you, Holly, for being a conscious capitalist, for being an entrepreneur with a heart, and for sharing your story with us. I'm sure that people are wondering, how can I follow you and follow along on this fascinating journey? And how can I get the Truth Map? How can I find out more about Lucidelix? So tell us how we can find out more.
Yes. Okay. So the TruthMap app is on both of the app stores. So you literally just have to search TruthMap on those app stores. You can visit our website at truthmap.us. Dr. Lucan's theoretical website you can find at thephysicsofemotioning.com. Okay. And then the Lucidelix company for an assessment to see if you would qualify for virtual ketamine therapy would be lucidelix.com. And we're everywhere on social media as TruthMap, except for Instagram, we're the TruthMap. And you can find me on Instagram at TruthMap with Holly as well.
Okay, amazing. Wow, Holly. Thank you. This has been such a fascinating conversation, and I look forward to following your journey and seeing where it all develops. You're a brilliant woman. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you.